Hello everyone and welcome to Thread Talks. My name is Sarinda Unamboowe and I am the Grants and Partnerships Manager at MAS's newly established MAS Foundation for Change, where we are focusing on piloting and scaling up impactful projects in ocean plastic pollution, biodiversity conservation, and access to clean water. Today I have with me Sarinda Unamboowe, who is the CEO of MAS Keerda, and we are going to be talking about Sari's journey at MAS, as well as traceability, which is a really new topic in the apparel sphere, and all sorts of other things about what makes him tick.
Uh-oh.
So Sari, tell me first, how would you describe what you do for a living on a daily basis?
I'd like to think I make beautiful products for athletes around the world.
That's something very exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's go a little bit back in time. How did you get started at MAS and how long ago was this?
Wow, it's been a long journey. I've been here this is my 22nd year, I think. Started quite by chance, and I have to say I had absolutely no clue about the apparel industry. I joined having had a career in banking, stockbroking, and then I ran a supermarket chain for about 18 months, about 2 years almost. And then quite by chance ended up as at MAS. My CV was picked by one of the directors at that time, and he gave me a call and asked me whether I'd like to join, and I was like, yeah, okay, sure, Seemed like a good idea at that time. It has been a great idea.
Definitely.
In retrospect, yeah.
And what was your first role? Tell us about it.
I joined as CEO of a company that hadn't been formed, so it was a role that didn't exist.
Always.
So, yeah, it was great because I was supposed to have been the CEO of a company called Linear Aqua, which actually got going after that. But it took about 7 months after I actually joined the company, or joined MAS, for Linear Aqua to get started up. So technically for about 7 months I didn't have a role to play, and I had several conversations with Mahesh at that time saying, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing here? But once we set the organization up, it was a really, really exciting journey because it was a joint venture with Speedo International, and we made some absolutely brilliant cutting-edge swimwear. I mean, we did 2, if not 3 Olympics, I think we covered during that period. Made the controversial fast skin suits out of Sri Lanka. That was a really exciting journey. And then went from high-end competition to the other end of the spectrum, where we were making high-end fashion as well for people like Victoria's Secret, Michael Kors, Calvin Klein, other brands like that. Yeah.
That sounds really interesting, and it must have been a big transition from what you were doing earlier.
Huge transition from onions to bikinis.
Maybe a trade up.
Yeah, a bit.
So now you're the CEO of one of MAS's business units called MAS Keerda,
Yeah.
Which is also a very large organization. And I have to ask, as a CEO, how do you approach long-term strategy building?
So I think the whole concept of long-term strategy building is very, very different in the world that we live in right now. Now long-term could be 16 months, 18 months, it's not much further than that. So it's very difficult to predict where you want to go to. But I personally like to have very general targets that I have to shoot for. And I've always been like that. Even as a kid, I've always said, okay, I want to do this. And it's been like a broad, more picture rather than a point. So in that sense, we have given ourselves some targets at Keerda where we want to be in 24, in 26, down the line. Having said that, how we get there could be very, very different. And how we get there is where it's very important in this day and age to be agile in not just how you manufacture, but how you look at your manufacturing and your overall business strategy as well. What worked over the last few months may not necessarily work over the next few months. We live in a world right now that we have got ravaged by COVID. We've been through that drama. Now we are facing Ukraine war and all kinds of other dramas. Then China has shut down again because of COVID. Then there's an economic, I wouldn't want to call it a meltdown, but there's certainly a downturn right now, rising inflation around the world, and then of course the lovely drama we're having in Sri Lanka.
It must be very different to when you really started working and things would have been maybe more predictable.
Absolutely, and I think those days our long-term strategies would be 5 years, and the 10-year strategy also would be kind of mapped out where we wanted to go. So a 5-year strategy was something that we would actually report on and we'd work towards, and we'd come and say, okay, this is what we're doing in the next year and the year after that. But that's very different now. Because now, for example, we have to be prepared to go and locate ourselves wherever the customer wants us to be, because they are chasing duty benefits, they are chasing political situations, they are chasing customer requirements, and there is speed. Customer wants things faster, and lots of people don't want to air freight right now because of impact on planet. So then the shipping time comes into it. So there are so many different factors that are changing constantly. And I think the ability to be able to literally think on your feet and to be really agile in how you remodel the company on almost a quarterly basis becomes more important than thinking of a long-term strategy.
Is that something that you think that then MAS should be investing in terms of really setting ourselves up with that agility?
I think people become absolutely key in this whole equation because ultimately where you are, what you're doing, and especially when there is a need for so much change, you need to have the people and the infrastructure to be able to do it. You can have all the digital infrastructure, you can have all the modern technology, everything, but if you don't have the right technical skill, the right leadership skill, and the people with the ability to be able to function in different environments, you're not going to be able to grow your business. So I think sometimes we as organizations tend to focus a lot on making sure that the cash position is right and making sure that are financially secure and all those things, and forget to invest on the people. If we don't invest on our people, we are not going anywhere.
And I think this has taken us to our main topic of conversation today, which is about sustainability and traceability. And maybe you can just explain what this is and what it means for the apparel and textile space.
Right. First, the topic of sustainability, we'll just park it to a side for a moment, right? And if you take traceability, you're basically, fundamentally what you're talking about is the ability to look at a point that a garment is starting from. So the base of the yarn, say we go that far back, and then you trace every movement of that yarn till it's consumed. It's purchased by somebody. We can even go beyond that because you can put QR codes into a garment that can then be traced wherever it goes after that. So you can be able to say, okay, it goes into landfill, or it goes into a recycling unit, or it goes as it's used as a car wash cloth, or whatever it may be. Right? So that's another. If you look at sustainability, the world has got extremely, what shall I say? It's not that the world is extremely conscious of it now, but it's a topic that if we don't address, we are going to self-destruct as a species. So it is something that we are all unfortunately not everybody is, but we should be really concerned about. How are garments being made and who's making them on both sides? Because at the same time, you want to democratize the process and make sure that people are being treated fairly in that entire process while your product is being made. So slave labor, underpaid labor, underage labor, labor in particular political hotspots, whatever it may be, whoever is there needs to be visible, and that can be tracked through traceability. That's the social side of it. To see whether a fabric manufacturer or a brand is using their process in a responsible way. Has everybody in that process been treated responsibly? That is a extremely important thing that can be measured through the traceability tools. The other thing is what resources are being used and how are they being used and how are they being disposed. That's the other side. So the people as well as the planet side gets covered really well in most of the theoretical tools that we are trying to come up with right now.
Right. And I like that you described this as a theoretical tool, because what you described sounds very difficult to do. And it sounds like there are lots of complexities and challenges about really trying to identify where does this thread, where does this button come from. Can you tell us about some of these like nitty-gritty challenges that you're facing?
So I think if you look at the technology is probably available, and I'm not a high-end techie, and I can't tell you where it's available. But if you look at say the ability to scan something and identify it and download that data from what you scan from a visual into data is all possible right now, right? So there are apps that can read weather, blood pressure, whatever it may be. The technology, I believe, is available. The architecture and how it's put together is what needs to be done. But also, as we speak, there are multiple traceability tools in the market. It's just that the level of sophistication and the adaptability to manufacture is different. Tracing something from a fabric roll, say, that comes from China, and then it goes to Sri Lanka for manufacture, and then it goes to the USA for retail, is very easy. It's just like a 2 or 3 code process. But what if you want to trace like every little detail, nuance of how that fabric gets to the cutting table, and every nuance of what process it follows. Now, the reason why that's not important to the consumer, that's not, right? That's important to the manufacturer, because if you can capture that data, then you can start predicting how these things are going to perform at cutting table, at needle point, when you're packing it, when it's traveling, when it's being worn. You can make all those predictions. And you can say, for example, okay, now I'm taking this a little far, right? But you can say, like, particular people like me who perspire a little bit under the heat, that this fabric is not really great because it's going to show up the perspiration. You can, you can just say, you can start making predictions like that on things. And of course, then it can go into health benefits and all kinds of things as well. But I feel that the traceability tools that we know right now are just the absolute tip of the iceberg.
Sure. And I mean, you really talked then about the benefits that an apparel manufacturer could derive from a really sophisticated traceability system. What is our role as an apparel manufacturer in developing that and making that happen? It's
still early days, Sarni, and I think we are looking at several options right now. I know that the company that I work at Keerda, we are working towards getting something started, but it's still very early days. Because the ask hasn't been there all this time. It has been like, we should be able to trace this and this will do that, but it not quite got down to it. Right. It will happen. I believe that we will have a reasonably well-adapted traceability tool that will give us a fair amount of data, probably 30% of the data that we could actually get in the future within the next 2 years.
Okay, that's exciting.
Yeah.
And is there a benchmark or a global standard that we're working to?
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, not in traceability. It's very new.
So this isn't something then that's mandated by a government or regulated by international law?
Not yet. Okay. But I can see it going in that direction.
And it's the consumers that are taking us there, or is it that this is manufacturer driven?
It's a combination of both. I think a lot of the change that we see in the way apparel is manufactured, and a lot of the changes in the legislation that we have seen, especially around compliance and social sustainability or sustainability in general, are consumer driven. But ultimately, the manufacturers have to take ownership also. It can't just be like, the kind of greenwash we see sometimes on the society, on the environmental side. That can't apply here. It has to be an authentic, genuine effort that we are making to make these changes.
And I think this idea of greenwashing is interesting because this is a challenge to the sustainability movement within apparel. Yeah. And do you think that there is a greenwashing equivalent in traceability?
There could be. There could definitely be, because if you're not entering authentic data on that, then it could be just eyewash, right? Having said that, as soon as you start doing something like this, there are invariably governing bodies that will come in to measure the authenticity, like audit bodies. So now, for example, compliance. Every company that works with the big brands of this world have to pass compliance audits that are extremely stringent, set by those brands. So as soon as traceability becomes an option, those will have those audits as well.
So Sari, we've been talking about how you can trace the materials going into a garment. Can the same then be done for the end product and the kind of waste that's generated from the garment as well?
Technically, yes, it can be. Because you can build in a QR code into a garment or a barcode into a garment, like a label, that can then be traced. Unless I'm wearing it, because I tend to cut all the labels off because if they are itchy. Right? But you can, now QR codes can be printed into the garment. You don't even do labels anymore. Now a lot of the apparel over the next couple of years, you will see getting away from that traditional label that we saw hanging in there. Those will come off. The tags that apparel came with in the past, with all the instructions in about 25 different languages, they will come off. And you will have a simple QR code printed into the garment that anybody with a mobile phone can check, and then all the instructions in whatever language you want will be on that code. Now, so we are heading into that level of technology. And if we do use that level of technology, then technically, yes, you can trace it going from that point onwards. Does it end up in landfill? Does it end up as a circularity product? Or does it end up repurposed for something else? Does it become a duster or a handbag or a quilt? No?
So you've painted this image then of me as a consumer going into a shop, and before I buy something, really pulling out my phone, tapping a QR code and really seeing all the information I need. So can you tell me, as a consumer, what questions should I ask in terms of what do I need greater clarity on?
So I think, certainly if you're looking at that kind of consumer that you're talking about, unfortunately that's quite a small percentage in the world, because if the world was more conscious, the way you were talking about it, more aware of the impact that they are having on the planet, we'd be in a much better place. Unfortunately, it's not, right? But we'll take that consumer, that consumer who's conscious, who wants to make a positive impact to planet, wants to do all those things. I think it will give you a lot of decision making. For example, it can also personalize your own experience. Like, say for example, depending on, okay, now religion is not a topic I like to talk about because I have no religion, I don't believe in religion. But if, for example, you have firm religious beliefs and then a particular location in the world is against those beliefs and you are a principled person, you want to act, or say you're really pissed off with what's going on in the Amazon, so you don't want anything from Brazil, you will have the ability then to be able to make that decision on the flow. Because now, say for example, you take something like, it will say made in Sri Lanka, right? Now you buy a t-shirt that says made in Sri Lanka. It could potentially be just cut and sewed in Sri Lanka. But 90% of the raw material, 99% of the raw material could have come from Azerbaijan. No, it could have come from anywhere. But the point I'm trying to make is, as soon as you know where the origin of that fabric was, the label saying made in Sri Lanka or made in Timbuktu doesn't make any difference. You know where that garment is, what that constructed garment, where it comes from, where it originates.
I love this idea of traceability essentially being something that gives everybody along the whole value chain more information. Absolutely. And therefore allows them to make a more democratic decision.
Information is the new gold. I think that is something that we constantly ignore. And in an apparel manufacturing organization, you take MAS for example. We manufacture hundreds and hundreds of millions of product. We manufacture more product in total than any one of our brands do as a whole anywhere in the world. Not even the biggest brands we work with make as many garments as we do across the world. So imagine the knowledge that we can capture on cutting information, on sewing information, on fabric behavior information, on how, just everything that we do, we have more information than anybody else. Mm-hmm.
And do you think that technologies like AI and blockchain have a really big role in making this kind of widespread and in use?
Absolutely. One is blockchain will make sure that the information is protected, and that is very, very important, because you don't want that to be doctored anywhere down the line. And then the rest of it is all the AI. When you say AI, that's like such a huge umbrella, that covers so many things under it. And what I was talking about, predictive analytics, that's a part of the AI spectrum. So I think AI is going to have a huge role to play right now. And I think predictability, and not just in how a garment is made, but how a factory performs, how everything operates within an environment of that process. It's all going to be predictable.
I think you're really kind of laying out this image of the apparel manufacturing world as something with a lot of new horizons and also new challenges.
Very exciting, yeah. Especially for an old bugger like me.
So actually on this, I wanted to ask you a few questions about how you lead then in this time of extreme change. And I wanted to ask you, what is your biggest challenge when you face your role as the CEO of a company within MAS?
I think the biggest challenge is we're dealing with people who are not willing to change. And I think if you're in an environment like you're living in right now, and you're at my age, if you haven't been able to change and stay relevant to the thinking and the technology and the changes that the world around you has gone through, you become a stumbling block to the organization moving forward. So I think it's extremely important for all of us as we age to be able to change with time. If we start going back to say, no, but that's not how it's done, I've been in this industry for 22 years, that's not how it's done, I know how to do it, you're dead. You're dead. I think what has worked for me is I have extremely smart people who work around me. And I'm constantly in awe of what they come up with. And I listen. And of course I can be very adamant in particular things that I want to do and how I want to do it. But I think that is also important. But those decisions shouldn't be made unilaterally. You can't just say, no, that's how we're going to do it. You have to listen to everybody. And a leader's role becomes to be able to understand first what technology and the changes are that we are going through. First, we have to understand what those changes are and why we are making those changes. That's one. Then what can the technology do? And then listen to the opinions and then bring it all together, condense it and say, okay, this is what we're going to do based on all the knowledge around you. What I have, as I have got older, what I have started doing more is listening more. And rather than being operational and saying like, no, this is how we do it or that is how we do it, listening to everybody and kind of steering it, rather than trying to do the nuts and bolts of it. So I think it's really important. Also, running a $20 million operation or a $10 million operation is a very different kettle of fish running a $500, $600, $700, $1 billion operation. You cannot get that level of involvement when you're running something that big. So those are the changes, and all of us have grown up. I mean, when I joined MAS, it was $200 million, and now Keerda is almost $500 million. So the whole of MAS was half the size of what Keerda was. So the mindset change that you need to run a bigger organization is quite significant, and we have to recognize that. And the unfortunate thing that I see in a lot of cases is that there are people who have grown with the organization, who are running now big blocks of the business, are still looking at the nuts and bolts, still looking at the little numbers. That is dangerous.
There's a lovely piece of research which shows that toddlers ask up to 100 questions per day. And then as we grow up and as we are educated in more traditional methods, we ask fewer and fewer, and experts ask the least. So Sari, how many questions do you think you ask every day?
I ask a lot of questions. I drive people nuts.
Okay.
Yeah, and also I'm constantly on Google, searching all kinds of stuff. Like, I think the last thing I searched was, another thing I do is like every time I watch a movie, I go, like watching the movie, I'm looking at the cast and what are they doing now, and I get all kinds of rubbish in this head as well. So I have like a head full of rubbish trivia.
That resonates.
But at the same time, I think it's very important to ask a lot of questions and have a curious mind. Arrogance is deadly. Arrogance is deadly. Arrogance with ignorance is the deadliest, which we're seeing a lot of in this country right now. Yeah, so especially if you're a leader who's ignorant and arrogant, that's the death knell for a country, as we're seeing, and a company.
And I'm sure these are lessons learned over a long career as well.
When you come to my age, if you haven't learned something, there's something seriously wrong.
So when you reflect on that career, can you tell us then about a failure or a setback that you had that helped you grow?
Lots of failures along the way, Sarni. I think there have been tiny ones, big ones, monumental ones that have almost crushed the company. But I think looking back, if I could change one thing, it ended well though. I must say that it ended well after a lot of pain and grief. In 2007, 2008, when the financial crisis was hitting, we sensed that the business was going to grow because we had specialized in swimwear. We were doing a really good job, and a lot of our brands had been talking about, you know what guys, you all are doing really well, so we have these tiny guys that we're working with, we're going to shut them down and move to you. And we had this information with us. Went to the shareholders. I told you there were three shareholders at Linear Aqua: Speedo, MAS, and another company called Brandot. And I got abused in absolute profanity. I was called a effing cowboy, I was called an effing moron, I was called all kinds of things. I was actually taken out of the board meeting, put in a car, and sent to a mall. Go and see what the real world looks like. Exact words. So I went to see what the real world looked like. There was no bloody cat in the mall. I think I was the only person there apart from the staff that worked there. Came back and I backed down on that decision of saying, no, okay, fine, we don't need the expansion now, we'll kind of make do. At that time, the company saw, because of the consolidation of our biggest customer to send their business to us, we had like a 67% growth that came our way in that 1 year. And almost doubling a company's growth in 1 year takes a huge amount of stress under any circumstances. But under circumstances where our expansions were stopped, saying that it was a stupid idea, and we were trying to manufacture it on the same footprint, ego got in the way at that point, and I was like, let's show these FS what we can do, and went ahead and took the business. In retrospect, what happened was the customer stayed with us, grew with us, and then we got added capacity, and we developed it from that point onwards. But there have been lots of things that we just got wrong along the way, and there will be in the future as well.
Of course. But then that sounds like you've changed your approach to what you consider winning then. And can I ask you now, at this stage, professionally and personally, what does winning look like to you?
Professionally, I think it's easier because you have targets set for yourself. There are clear indications that you want to go after, and then you go after them, and whether they are visible and they are measured in a public setting, or whether it's something that you set for yourself, it's more easy to measure by. Personally, I have always measured my success in life by my mindset. It is how my relationship with my sons, my relationship with my loved ones, my relationships with my friends. That to me is of fundamental importance. How strong are those? And to me, if I have those being strong and firm, and I enjoy getting up in the morning and facing another day, then that's a win. Every day is a win. But there are some days you wake up and you just feel like shit. And you're just like, what the hell am I doing here? But I think we all go through those days. So winning is about, in life, I don't think you ever really, it's not like crossing a finish line. There is no real finish line in life. You just have to win every day. Every day should be a little better than the day before. If you can improve one thing about you, it's a little win. So I think it's a collection of little wins along the way. And you will have disappointments, being able to take them in stride. Ups and downs of life.
Do you feel like the people around you that you work with also pick up this mentality?
Well, I do speak about it a lot. And the other thing that I have always done is I've worked at MAS for 21 years, and although I've worked with extremely brilliant people, and people who I love working with, I have given them a lot of space in their personal life to have their personal life, and then I have had a very private personal life myself. So I like to separate the two. And I always tell people that you need to have a life outside work. And the danger of creating an entire life structure around work is that then you become a very single-dimensional individual. You have to have different interests, different groups of friends, and constantly learn from the people around you. Surround yourself with very smart people. And so I try to, in a real papa way, try to tell that to people, but I think they think I'm mad.
I'm sure they think it's valuable. But then can I ask you, what are your interests outside of work? What are your hobbies? What do you spend your weekends doing?
I do a lot of photography. I'm a wildlife photographer. I spend a lot of time on that hobby. I also enjoy traveling a lot. And whenever I can, I either travel out of the country or travel within the country. Of course, now there's no petrol, so I can travel around and on my garden on a bicycle. But I ride bicycles. I go for treks. I love the outdoors, and it's a lifestyle that I put a lot of hard work into my lifestyle to make sure I enjoy, because I don't believe that there should be work and then you should work till you're God knows how long and then retire and then start living. That's bullshit. But if you have a stroke and you die tomorrow, I could drop dead today. No.
I hope not.
Well, I hope not too. I had a few new pumps put in here, so I hope they're working. But it can happen. Life is very fickle. So I think it's important that every day is taken as a gift, and you live it to the best of the ability you have on that day. You can't go partying, and if that's your thing, you can't do it. I probably did it in my life, but my priorities now are very different. But the one thing, and this is something that is I'd like to share in a public forum because it's MAS. One of the questions, Mahesh asked me 2 questions. He asked me 3 questions when I was in my final interview. Do we have time for this?
Of course.
Okay. So the first question was, he said, answer this really quickly. He goes, when you came to Royal College in grade 1, what was your first impression? I said, there was no piano. And he looks at me like I was nuts. And then I had to explain how, we used to stand around the piano in the ladies' college nursery and sing songs, and that was like the highlight of my life, and there was no piano. So that was
It's a
one.
great piano.
Yeah. Then he told me, okay, you're going to be working with the brand Speedo. He said, but the first impression you had of the brand Speedo. I said, that's the first time I realized that the first stroke you took when you did competition swimming was not this. Because those days we used to wear Bernard Boteju swimsuits. We used to dive in and they used to be on your knees. So then you had to pull them up and then start swimming. So the Speedos used to stay on. The third question he asked me was, what do we need to know about how you work? And I said, Mahesh, if I have 21 days of leave, the chances are I'll take 22. And I have every single year that I have worked at MAS, I have taken every day of leave I am due. And I have used that because Sri Lanka is lovely, you have a poya on a Thursday and something else on a Wednesday. I have blocked those days out. I go on my calendar early, block those days out, and I travel and I live my life. So it's and if anybody says that they are too busy to be able to balance their life out with their hobbies and their desires, they are deluding themselves, because that's bullshit.
I fully agree. And actually,
That's
I think I have heard you use the phrase life balance.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
I don't like work-life balance, because work and life, what's the difference? Work is a part of your life. So it's about balancing your life. I believe there are, 3 things that we balance. One is your responsibilities at work, your responsibility in society, and the one you balance on your head is the responsibility to yourself. And whichever one tilts you in different directions, you've got to keep that one balancing on your head. That falls off your history. I think it's really important to keep that mental sanity and your sensibility about yourself and your life. You should know who you are and live true to those values.
I think that's a great note to end on, and I think that's something that will resonate so much with people who are watching this, whether they're part of the MAS family or whether they are completely new to who we are as a company. A great piece of advice for all of us.
Thank you.
So thank you, Sari, for being on this show and for being part of Thread Talks, and looking forward to talking to you again another day.
My pleasure. Thank you.